Thank you, Megan. That was wonderful. You've set a high bar for the rest of the meeting. I'm not sure we can get past that, but thank you. Next, approval of this. Approval of the supplementary agenda. Is there any?
Thank you, Council. There is no additional supplementary agenda. However, I would like to note that 16A, authorization of payments to grassroots media vendor, has been removed by administration.
Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, for open session agenda items and the general nature thereof. Seeing none, 9A, announcement of the mayor, offer to purchase property identification number 005990240 Wilson Street, Plan 261, Chatham-Kent. In consideration of proposed declaration to close the unopened road allowance known as Wilson Street, south of Park Street in Dresden. The property being considered to be closed, legally described as Wilson Street Plan 261, being all of property identification number 005990240, Municipality of Chatham-Kent. On December 29th, 2018, a notice of intention to close the above noted road allowance was published in the Sydenham Current online newspaper and on January 3rd, 2019 on the municipal website. I will now invite any person wishing to be heard in this regard to approach the podium and give reasons why their lands will be adversely affected or their obligations to this declaration to close this portion of the road allowance. Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept 9A? Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Finn. Any questions? Seeing none, the vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Thank you. 10A.
This evening we have a deputation by Louis Rush, Kent Federation of Agriculture, and Harry Lawson, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, regarding agricultural matters, a guide for municipal councillors and staff. Welcome, gentlemen.
Mayor Caniff and councillors. First, I'd like to congratulate you, Mayor Caniff, and council for the new ones and the returning ones for your election and re-election and your courage in allowing your name to stand on the ballot. My name is Harry Lawson. I'm here representing the Kent Federation of Agriculture as Vice President. With me is Louis Rush. He's the local Ontario Federation of Agriculture Director. So I'm Kent Federation, Louis is Ontario Federation. Louis also sits on the Kent board. The Kent Federation of Agriculture is a non-profit corporation whose purpose is to advocate for the interests of its 1,900 plus members, Chatham-Kent farm business members. The KFA is one of 52 county and regional federations in Ontario. These 52 federations form the grassroots foundation for the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. And above that, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Federations represent Canadian farmers as general farm organizations. They're not commodity specific, they're general organizations, locally, provincially, and nationally with the 3 levels. KFA is our local federation, and its purpose is to advocate and engage the issues that affect our membership and agriculture at large. Some of the issues that KFA focuses on are the farmland tax rate, which you're going to be talking about in budget deliberations soon. As it compares, it's a ratio as it compares to the residential rate. Drainage maintenance, which is a huge issue in Chatham-Kent, and the critical requirement of maintaining a road and bridge infrastructure that meets the needs of agriculture and the community at large. Many mentions were made of infrastructure during the campaign, so let us keep that momentum going. KFA is looking forward to sharing our comments and input to council and staff in the future. So it's now Louis' turn to tell you what OFA has to offer and share with you OFA's Agriculture Matters Guide for municipal councillors and staff.
So, Mayor and Council, thank you for this opportunity to speak on how Chatham-Kent and OFA can all help each other to form cooperative messaging to benefit all taxpayers. Under the current financial debt structure of our province, unless you can provide solutions in your ask and have payback, don't bother asking. We can tell you that from experience. OFA is in daily contact with provincial ministries on many subjects. Our top priorities are basically the same as Chatham-Kent's. We must find ways to upgrade our infrastructure, such as roads, including the gravel roads and bridges on our rural roads to keep us competitive in the marketplace, and our machinery off main highways as much as possible for the safety of our residents. Next is value-added processing and manufacturing, such as what's just occurred here with White's Pickle in Wallsburg. It's better to have 25 small plants hiring 15 to 50 people than one large plant hiring 500 people. These small operations can grow and increase other employment. This is not in any way to say that we're not open to larger plants. It's much easier to finance and see how they can expand. There's many opportunities in agriculture for jobs related to new and constant changing high-tech equipment and research, and they are required to be filled by our off-farm employment. University of Guelph Ridgetown has many opportunities for high-paying jobs for our young people in this municipality. I would invite you, if you got a pen on hand, to look up what has been presented by the OFA, which will take way too long now, and Producing Prosperity OFA. If you Google that, there's a lot of information on there that pertains right to this municipality. So I could say a lot more, but I'd rather leave it open for questions if you have any. Thank you.
Councillor Oche?
Sorry, Mr. Roche, I missed what you said to write down there.
It's Producing Prosperity OFA. Google that. And this is our push that we had for the provincial election. It's been very much accepted by the province. It's all about infrastructure, gas, your different ways of communications, all these different things are in there. And to help expand smaller communities instead of everything going to the large GTA, it's better to bring some of those people out where we already have a place for housing, and it keep schools open. Tire replacement, all those things. Use all of these as everybody keeps migrating away from these smaller areas.
Thank you.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you very much to Mr. Rush through the mayor. In this document that we received as part of our council package, there were about 60 recommendations within 27 different issue areas. And I wonder whether you have taken the time to rate us or give us a score on how we're doing on those recommendations that are enclosed therein.
I'm going to throw that back at you and say that it's not my job to rate it in that fashion. I would encourage you to see how we can help you and bring you up to those standards if you feel you're not there. I think that's more of a cooperative way to make this work rather than try rating.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Rush. Number 11, deputations.
None were received as of 3 p.m. today.
12, consent agenda. I have a motion to accept. Councillor Bondi, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any items of interest? Councillor Kirkwood-White?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Which items are the...
Oh, sorry. It's item number 12A2, Community Meetings Information and Recommendations.
12A2. Is that the only one?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So Oh, sorry. Councilor McGregor. Councilor C. McGregor.
12A1, please.
12A1, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, can I get support for the rest of the consent agenda? All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? All right, 12A2. Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you very much. I wanted to note that I really enjoyed accompanying our mayor and Amy Wilcox on the interviews with the local nonprofits and sports organizations and service clubs and arts and cultural groups. And it goes without saying that I'm a very strong advocate for the nonprofit sector and the over 30,000 volunteers who contribute their time and talent and treasure to our community. So the comments that I'm about to make are not meant as a criticism of the significant investment of time that has been devoted throughout Chatham-Kent to these meetings, which, by the way, for the benefit of the public, have been extremely well received. But I do wish to raise a caution or two with regard to a few of the preliminary recommendations outlined in the report, as they could have potential for duplication of effort that is already underway by some other community partners. For example, CAVCO, the Kent Association of Volunteer Coordinators, already hosts an annual volunteer appreciation event and has done so for the past 16 years. And opposed to creating this event anew, there could be potential partnership opportunities with CAVCO to enhance the voluntary sector and to recognize the significant contribution that is being made by local volunteers. And also, while I don't want to necessarily steal their thunder, I have been granted permission by the new CEO at United Way to let you know that United Way will be making a very special public announcement on Thursday morning at their campaign touchdown breakfast about an exciting new service that will enhance our community's volunteer attraction and recruitment process, bringing it into the digital age. They've been working on this project now for the past 18 months in consultation with numerous volunteer centers throughout North America. And this new service will be provided free of charge to all nonprofits and charities in Chatham-Kent. So stay tuned. United Way of Chatham-Kent is a member of Volunteer Canada, Volunteer Ontario, and the Ontario Nonprofit Network, and has been in the business of volunteer recruitment, training, and education for the past 19 years. So, as we enter budget deliberations, the question I think we need to be asking ourselves as municipal councillors is, are there other organizations in our community who have already taken a leadership role in establishing and or implementing initiatives, and is there a possibility for partnership with these groups and organizations?
Amy, do you want to answer that, or?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Kirkwood-White. Thank you for that information. I know that you have provided me with some of those details during our community meetings. It is definitely the hope of the municipality not to duplicate efforts, but to work with those who are currently taking on those initiatives and be able to find those synergies that we can work together. So we do encourage those, our councillors as well as other community groups, to please be in contact with us and let us know if there are any initiatives within this report and anything that you hear from us recommended in the future. And they can contact us through the municipal phone number, 519-360-1998.
Councillor Crew?
You're not working either.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Amy, the report makes a recommendation for $400,000 to be set aside for these initiatives. Now, I understand that this is a preliminary glance, because I didn't see any consultation with departments, because I was looking at it and I was thinking, okay, this amount of money for that, that's a good thing, but what will it really cost? Okay, so will that be, when we get to look at this in whole, will that be considered?
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to you, to Councillor Crew. Our hope is the process would be for it to go through to council for deliberation and for them to approve to set aside the $400,000 in a reserve. We would then consult with community groups as well as my colleagues in the other business units to conduct business cases to find out the true costing and processes going forward for each type of recommendation, and then those recommendations to come forward to council in a report to council, whether it's an individual reports or a grouping of them, for council to approve each of those recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm on now.
Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, these meetings, they were well received in East Ken. I think the volunteers felt appreciated, and most of the groups felt like they're part of a cog in a wheel that's turning now, and they like the idea that we're starting to pay a little bit of attention to what they're doing in the communities. I know you and Amy spent a lot of hours doing this, and we probably went to 40 of the meetings in East Ken, or 30, and I know it takes up a lot of time. I don't think this is totally perfect yet, but I'll tell you what, we're in the right direction, and I think you know, this is going to be good for the whole community. Thanks.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I just want to put a bug in the air that as I was looking through this, I think it needs to be inclusive of everybody. So there was some situations that we had, for example, the neighborhood, get-togethers. I think we may be in a position of eliminating some people, like who's invited, who's not invited, that we needed at a higher level that is inclusive to everybody. And also, I'd like to see maybe the cleanup projects have a little bit more money than maybe the neighborhood parties have, and switch those up. But that's just minor things, I think, as we work through this whole project.
Thank you. Councillor Kirkwood-White, motion to accept 12A1 or 12A2?
I so move.
Seconder? Councillor Finn, all in favor? Opposed? 12A1, Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. I just wanted to point out, and I'm assuming that Amy, if you didn't get a copy, I will send it to you. I received a copy or an email from the concert band that the numbers issued in this report were incorrect as to the numbers. I thought you were copied on this email. Sorry, I don't have the email in front of me. I haven't quite figured out how to split my screen yet. No, it's okay. It's okay. I've got the report in front of me. It'd take me too long to get there. But I do know that the performing members are 85, not 112, as listed in here. And there was a couple other numbers. I think that number might have come from an old document or something, the 112. So that was just that. But the only other thing I would like to say, because this does kind of fall into the first report that we just had, that thank you very much for getting this information to council and back to us. As you know, it was an important an issue to my community and to myself, and that I assume that we will look forward in a more detailed report later on, that we will see this come through in the budgeted amount and at budget time as to how we will treat these two bands or these concert bands within our communities equally. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to accept? Seconder, Councillor Latimer, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. 13A, notices of motion. Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, Councillor Mark Oche, will bring forward the following motion, January 21st, 2019, that Chatham-Kent puts security cameras in at least the 3 following locations due to constant vandalism to the restrooms. whereas Erio restrooms on the beach are vandalized on an almost yearly basis, whereas Wallaceburg's Glen Mickle Park's restrooms have also been vandalized, and whereas the Tilbury Memorial Park has been a constant area being vandalized on an almost yearly basis, and whereas the security cameras may be much cheaper in the long run than just fixing the restrooms and having the vandalism continue in the future. Whereas there may be more parks that are having the same issues, that they be added to the list of parks to have security cameras installed, and pay this over our 4-year council term. Thank you.
Councillor Kirkwood White.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, Councillor Karen Kirkwood White, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the January 21st council meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas Mayor Caniff and the majority of municipal councillors have been meeting with over 130 local nonprofit service clubs, sports organizations, and arts and cultural groups over the past 6 to 7 weeks, and whereas these interviews have clearly demonstrated the significant value that local nonprofits and their volunteers contribute to the vitality of Chatham-Kent, and whereas it is important for the municipality of Chatham-Kent to assume a leadership role in the support of such groups that are established to enhance community and economic development, and whereas there is a commitment to provide financial support to local nonprofits through the Community Partnership Fund within the 2019 municipal budget, and whereas civic engagement is a prerequisite for building a stronger, safer, and more caring community, therefore be it resolved that a 13-member fund review committee, similar to other local citizen review grant committees, be established, consisting of 8 members of the general public who are knowledgeable about the nonprofit and charitable sector and who have contributed a minimum of 10 years of active volunteer service, together with 5 members of the Chatham-Kent municipal staff who have previously served in a grant review role. And further, that such Community Partnership Fund Review Committee include 1 eligible volunteer appointed by municipal councillors for each of wards 1 through 5, 3 eligible volunteers appointed by municipal councillors in Ward 6, with facilitation and leadership provided by Amy Wilcox, Manager Corporate Initiatives. And in keeping with the new council's focus on greater transparency, that this grant review process include an evaluation component to be shared with municipal council, which captures specific feedback from both approved and unapproved grant recipients. And I want to point out that I have shared the majority of this content with Amy and in concert with a couple of other councillors with amendments that were made to my original motion. Thank you.
Thank you. 14, Finance, Budget, and Information Technology Services.
Item 14A, 2018 BMA Municipal Study. Your Worship, we have a presentation by Steve Brown.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I'm here tonight to review the highlights of the 2018 BMA Municipal Study, which had 108 municipalities participate. Chatham-Kent takes part in the BMA Municipal Study annually, which provides us with an opportunity to benchmark ourselves against other municipalities. A comparison is made between Chatham-Kent and 7 other municipalities in this presentation, which were selected from a relevant group of municipalities based on geographic and socioeconomic factors. The following slides will show how Chatham-Kent compares to our 7 chosen comparators, which is shown as the group average, and all 108 municipalities who participated in the study, which is shown as the survey average. The BMA study primarily focuses on 3 areas: socioeconomic, financial, cost of service, and affordability indicators. There are several factors that affect a municipality's financial condition. The socioeconomic area captures population change, population density, and taxes as a percentage of income. The financial area captures items such as tax revenues, tax expenditures per capita, debt, and reserves. The cost of service and affordability indicator compares Chatham-Kent's cost of services and taxation to the other municipalities who participated in the study. Based on the 2016 census data, Chatham-Kent's population decreased 2% from 2011 to 2016, which is the second highest amount within the group of comparators. During the same time period, the group population increased by an average of 1.5%. The average population for all 108 municipalities who participated in the study saw an increase of an average of 4.8%. Chatham-Kent's population has been decreasing since 2006, when it hit a high of just over 108,000 residents. BMA uses manifold data mining to determine current population outside of census years. On the graph, it's represented in the red line. This group has projected that Chatham-Kent's population has increased since 2016 to approximately 105,000 in 2018. A significant challenge that Chatham-Kent faces is its population density. Population density represents the number of individuals per square kilometer. As you can see on the table, Chatham-Kent has a low population density, meaning there are fewer people to pay for the required services, such as roads, bridges, water, and wastewater. Chatham-Kent has a population density of 43 people per square kilometer, but London has 968, Sarnia 450, and Windsor has over 1,500 per square kilometer. Since 2011, Chatham-Kent has been faced with an assessment shift, with the tax burden being shifted away from commercial and industrial properties and on to residential and farm. This has occurred as a result of factory closings, along with Assessment Review Board appeals, which many big box stores have undertaken to reduce their assessment. While commercial and industrial properties have seen significant assessment decreases, farmland has seen significant increases in their value. In 2011, residential and farm were responsible for roughly 68% of the tax burden. In 2018, this number has grown to 74%, a 6% increase. In 2018, Chatham-Kent had the 6th lowest assessment per capita of the 108 municipalities who participated in the study, with roughly $95,000 of a weighted assessment per capita. Assessment per capita takes Chatham-Kent's total weighted assessment divided by our population. In the group of 7 comparator municipalities, Chatham-Kent is second lowest, ahead of only Windsor. Household income is a measure which indicates a community's ability to pay for the services that are provided by the municipality. Chatham-Kent is on the low end of the municipalities who participated in the survey and is below both the group and the survey average, with a household income of approximately $80,000. The financial position of a municipality is a key indicator of its health. The financial position is determined by taking the assets of a municipality less its liabilities. Chatham-Kent has a positive financial position of $948 per capita, significantly above the survey average of $435 and slightly above the group average of $895 per capita. Prior to 2014, Chatham-Kent had a negative financial position. This means that its liabilities exceeded its assets. In 2014, Chatham-Kent moved to a positive financial position of $241 per capita, which has continued to increase, reaching $948 per capita in 2017. The asset consumption ratio of a municipality is an indicator of the age of its assets. The older the overall age of its assets, the greater the ratio. The tax consumption ratio are those assets that are funded through property tax dollars, while the water and wastewater assets are funded through the Public Utility Commission rates. Chatham-Kent's asset consumption ratio are higher than both the survey and group average. Fast-growing municipalities typically have a lower asset consumption ratio as they continue to build infrastructure to meet the growing demands of that municipality. The level of reserves required by municipality will vary for a number of reasons, which may include services that they provide, the age and condition of its infrastructure, service levels that are desired by its residents, and economic conditions and projections, to name a few. A reserve comparative analysis measures a municipality's reserves as a percentage of its own source revenues. Chatham-Kent had reserve balances funded through tax of 69%, which is higher than both the group and the survey average. Chatham-Kent's water and wastewater reserves are below both the group and survey average. However, they've continued to increase in 2017. Chatham-Kent continues to make significant progress in lowering its debt. Chatham-Kent's overall outstanding debt and tax debt is above both the group and the survey average. A few key points that should be noted are that approximately 55% of Chatham-Kent's debt is related to water and wastewater, and a large portion of Chatham-Kent's tax debt is funded by senior levels of government. The actual amount of debt funded by the taxpayers of Chatham-Kent equates to approximately $167 per capita. Many municipalities aim to have a debt-to-reserve ratio of 1, as this is deemed financially prudent by rating agencies. A ratio of 1 denotes that for every $1 of debt, there's $1 of reserves. Chatham-Kent has healthier debt-to-reserve ratio than the survey average of 1. A ratio of 0.6 means that for every $1 of reserves, Chatham-Kent has 60 cents of debt. This has improved since 2016, when the ratio was 0.7. Taxes receivable are the taxes that have been billed and are owing by the residents and businesses of Chatham-Kent, but have not yet been paid. Taxes receivable are a sign of a municipality's health and its residents' ability to pay their tax bills. Taxes receivable in Chatham-Kent has remained constant since 2015 and is below both the group and the survey average. Comparing Chatham-Kent's water and wastewater costs for residential households, we are close to the survey average, but above the group average, with only Windsor and Sudbury being higher in the group of comparators. Chatham-Kent is below the survey average, even though we have a significant amount of infrastructure which is spread over a wide geographic area. For example, Windsor has 3 total water and wastewater plants, but in Chatham-Kent, because of our huge size, we have 14. A water and wastewater comparison for industrial water usage shows that Chatham-Kent is below both the group and survey average, with only Sarnia having a lower industrial water and wastewater costs within the group. Comparing single-family detached homes, the taxes paid in Chatham-Kent are below both the group and the survey average for a similar house in other municipalities. For example, if you were to purchase a house in Chatham-Kent, that may cost you $200,000. But if you were to go to London and purchase that exact same house, it may cost you $300,000. So while you may hear that London's tax rate is lower, you are still paying generally the same amount of taxes for that exact same house in both locations. Chatham-Kent does not have a significant number of multi-res high-rises. However, the taxes paid per unit in Chatham-Kent are above both the group and the survey average. When comparing the tax burden on commercial buildings, Chatham-Kent is above the survey average, but below the group average when you're looking at taxes paid per square foot. Over the last several years, most recently in 2018, Council has been reducing the industrial tax ratio through its tax policy. As noted in this slide, Chatham-Kent's industrial taxes per square foot is substantially lower than both the group and the survey average. When comparing both taxes and water and wastewater costs, Chatham-Kent is below both the group and survey average. Chatham-Kent has one of the lowest costs of services in the survey of the 108 municipalities who participated. With Chatham-Kent having one of the lowest incomes per household rating in the study, the property tax and water as a percentage of income is above both the group and the survey average, even though, as noted in the previous slide, Chatham-Kent has one of the lowest costs of services in the survey.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Steve, just a question. You said our tax rate's relatively comparable to other communities based on the idea that if you lived in a house of the similar style or size in, say, London, then the taxes would be equal. So I get that. But my question offhand, you may not know offhand, and that's okay because I didn't forward you the question, but do you know what our mill rate is, which is like the impact assessed value times our residential mill rate equals what we pay in taxes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have...
Or they don't call it mill rate anymore, tax rate, whatever.
Tax rate.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a significant number of tax rates, depending on if you live in the city of Chatham, outlying community, if you live in a rural neighborhood. So there's a significant number of tax rates.
And that's like the area rated stuff, right? Like,
correct. I believe we have in excess of 2,000 tax rates, depending on where you live.
Do they vary much?
If you look at the city versus a rural, they can, because the city has street lights, garbage pickup, stuff like that, where the rural...
Right. Is there a big variance between the area rated locations versus places that don't have garbage pickup and street lights? Or is it minuscule? I honestly don't know. I'm just
There can be a fair size variance depending on where the property is located. So if you look at the typical house in Chatham-Kent, the tax rate is about 1.86%.
1.86?
1.8635.
And that's what, when we get our impact assessed value that we all receive, that we're going to get another one in a couple of years, is going to be a lot worse than what, or better, because the values are going higher. So I guess it's, in this conversation, not so much better. But, so that assessed value times 1.8635 equals generally our tax rate.
Depending on where you live.
Just, it's kind of confusing for people, like it is for me, but that's...
Yeah, and it really depends on where you live.
Right, so that'd vary, the 1.86, depending on...
Right.
Now, a follow-up question. If one was to own a commercial building, like a little strip mall, would the same scenario play out, like the same strip mall in Mississauga would pay approximately the same taxes here? Because the values are widely different.
Right, so when you look at, thank you, Mr. Mayor, when you look at the commercial properties, Chatham-Kent is typically a little bit more than a lot of, I think we're more than the survey average. So if you actually look at that, we may be more here when you look at a comparable property than, for example, Mississauga or another municipality.
And the values would be much different, because I think we can kind of quantify the value of, you know, the bungalow that we've been referring to for a long, long time. That value versus London versus Toronto, you can probably get a pretty good average as to what the differences would be. And as far as commercial buildings, is there that same kind of equal split percentage-wise to, say, a little strip mall on Richmond Street that has Bondi's Dry Cleaners in it? And a Domino's, by the way. So would the value of that little strip mall versus that same strip mall in London, would that have the same variance as the little bungalow in Chatham to the little bungalow in London, if you get what I'm saying?
They may vary slightly, but in general, if a property in Chatham-Kent is going to be assessed less than London than in Mississauga, so you still have that same...
Commercially and residentially, it kind of follows along the same track.
Any type of property. And if I just may follow up to your comment about the impact with the assessment, just so the public knows, when there is a reassessment cycle, that is revenue neutral to the municipality.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that's very clear.
Could you explain that? Because that seems odd for people that, you know, mine goes up, does somebody go down?
Correct.
Right, because that seems, I don't know if anybody...
Just to make it clear, if all properties go up 2% and there was a 0% budget increase, all else being equal, everyone would pay the same taxes. If every property went up an average of 2% and yours went up 4%, you'd be paying more because your property increased more than the average property in Chatham-Kent.
Okay.
So if your property goes up the same amount as the average, all else being equal, you'd be paying the same.
Yeah, you're square, right? Yeah. Right. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a couple questions. One is, you were referring to the tax rates, and do you have a sheet, paper, or obviously some other electronic document that shows the tax rate comparators for each one of the former municipalities or wards?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During our, after our tax policy goes to council, we bring a report to council with the tax rates, and that outlines every tax rate by ward, by class, and that's where you'd find that.
Do you have last year's?
Not on me, but I...
No,
yes.
No, I'm aware of that. I'd like to get a copy of that if I could. Okay. And you used a 1.86 as the average across the entire piece on residential. Is that
correct?
Right. Do you have? You don't have it with you anyway, so you can't tell me that. I was going to ask what the Chatham one was, but okay. But that'll be on the sheet.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions. I did have a comment just because for a lot of, I guess, what, 7 people? 8? How many people are new to this? The last sheet, the last slide that you have, if you could put that up, that's what we always refer to as the ability to pay. So when you look at the other slides, Chatham-Kent looks pretty good in comparison on many of the slides to the group average and the survey average on certain things. But the reality, when it really comes down to you making decisions starting this Wednesday and going through to tax time, you've got to keep a focus on the ability to pay, because the real issue is, as you can see from that chart, the actual property taxes may not be out of line, but the income levels and the demographics of this community, because of the aging of the community, lessen the ability to pay. So that means that taxes and water and et cetera are a greater percentage of the income that people have in Chatham-Kent than they are in all those other communities. And when you take 108 of them, we're in the bad side of that number too. It's not just the group comparison and that survey average. I suspect, because it's always been that way, you'd see that we don't stand very well with respect to the 108 communities either. And so when you think about, am I in favor of taxes going up or not, you got to think about the person who's going to have to pay that, and that's the ability to pay sheet. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I was trying to simplify it, because when you haven't seen this before and it all sort of comes at you like a tidal wave, it's important to know that that's one of the big issues that you got to face.
Thank you. Can I get it? Councillor Scotchy?
Just, I guess this will be a little bit of an easier question. So it's fantastic to see how we rate with so many municipalities, but how do we kind of basically get into that group there of those other severed communities? Because a lot of those communities there don't face a lot of the problems that we do in regards to, like you said, the wastewater management and infrastructure. So comparing us to places like London and Windsor, to me that seems, the numbers are going to be a little skewed, I think, right? Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when you actually look at Windsor, it's a pretty comparable municipality. So when you actually look at the reason, so this spreadsheet here sort of gives the reasons. Sarnia, London, and Windsor were all chosen because of their geographic proximity to Chatham-Kent. We hear a lot of comments, well, in Windsor or well in London, and that's why we had them. Sudbury was chosen based on their population density and their land area. They're actually very similar from that perspective to Chatham-Kent. Brantford, because their population and their average household income. Mississauga was one because we always hear, again, sort of like the Sarnia, London, Windsor, that GTA is a lot cheaper to live, so that's why we included that. They're not cheaper to live, but their tax rates are a lot less. And then Sault Ste. Marie is because they've had a declining population, and that's sort of why we include them, because that's what we've had. So those are the reasons behind each of the comparators.
Yeah, thank you. My concern was just in regards to the square kilometer population, which makes the numbers can be skewed a little bit in regards to they don't see a lot of difficulties that we would see, as Mr. Solomon was saying, in regards to the difficulty paying for those services, because our population is like I said, a lot lower, right? So
correct. And when you're looking at the most like us, Sudbury out of this group would be the most like us.
Thank you very much.
Councillor C. McGregor?
Yes, thank you, and through the mayor. Just a question about the good report. I love the condensed version that you send us. So my question is I know a number of years ago we opted to get this lovely big book of lovely reading. How much longer are we locked into the yearly copy of this? I know, I think when I first came on in the first term, we were only getting it every so many years, but that changed, I think, in my second year, and now we continue to get them at, which is probably, I'm not sure, a cost that we need every single year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the actual books, we were looking at next year, giving the council an option if they wanted the hard copy or just send out the electronic version so that they don't have to lug around the big book going forward. So does that answer your question?
Well, no. Does it make a difference in the cost to have, we're a part of this program, right? That.
So we send those to Xerox ourselves and print them, so there would be a slight cost savings by not printing them because we wouldn't be putting that to Xerox.
Okay, so, but in the past, were we still a part of this program? It was just an option that we decided to have them print? Or is it, because I know like a lot of this goes from 211 to 216, so it's tied into the census. So year after year, a lot of this information is not changing, right?
Actually,
or is it changing every year in this book?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, a lot of the information in that book does change. The population data is based on the census, but everything else is changing in the book. So when you look at most of the slides, you would see a change every year. It takes into account our last financial year, which for right now would be 2017, and then also assessment data for the current year, which is 2018.
Okay, so will you come to us before this is print next year, or?
So the plan is before we send it to the printer, we'll ask council if they want an electronic copy or a hard copy.
We don't need to make a motion to save some trees or anything like that.
No,
that
we've already been told that that's the best way to do it.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to accept the report? Councillor Foss, seconded by Councillor Sakachi. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. (14B).
Thank you. Item 14B, October 2018 budget variance forecast.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor B. McGregor.
I'll second.
Any questions? Seeing none, we put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 15, Community Human Services.
Item 15A, 2018 Registry Week Enumeration Final Report. We have a brief presentation by Chantal Perry, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mayor Knaff, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having me here tonight to talk about this important initiative. I'm going to start this presentation with a brief video, and I apologize to anybody in advance who's already seen it. This video is about our 2018 Registry Week journey in Chatham-Kent. Chatham-Kent might be a beautiful place to live, work, and play, but not for everybody, not if you're homeless. For some people, it's about where they're going to find their next meal, where they're going to sleep tonight, and where they're going to sleep tomorrow. Enumeration is simply the counting of homeless people. However, in Chatham-Kent, we've decided to do a registry week. So over the course of the week, we have 80 volunteers going out to 36 different community partners and doing surveys with people who have nowhere to sleep tonight.
The entire quest for enumeration is an interesting sort of pivotal point in most communities as they try to evolve from managing homelessness to ending homelessness. And so now we've moved from just doing a count to actually engaging with individuals, screening them to see if they're actually experiencing homelessness. We would identify what parts of the municipality may we actually find people who are living unsheltered.
So right now we're doing a mini point-in-time count behind the Black Street Bridge. What that means is we're walking the trails, looking to see if anyone has stayed here overnight. If they haven't, if we run into anyone, we do an anonymous survey, just to capture some of the demographic information and try and capture what is the homelessness problem in our community.
There are a lot of stereotypes just in the general community about people experiencing homelessness. Oftentimes people find themselves in that situation just through circumstance, just losing housing or being, evicted.
My situation, I had a house fire. I got to find a new place to live. Right now, I'm just staying with a girlfriend. There is a shortage of housing because a lot of people are still living on the streets of Chatham, and they are in need of places to live.
So we have lots of volunteers helping us across the municipality. Again, because homelessness is a complex issue, we have to pull in all the partners. What we really hope to get out of this is a list of people who are at risk of being homeless, because what we want to do is actually reach out to them and provide support and find them homes.
Homelessness is an issue that every place everywhere faces. I believe we do have more homeless here in the city than the city's even willing to admit. There's a waiting list more than a mile long. There are families with children who have been on that waiting list for some years and are still waiting to get into housing. The more we can do to look into it and address and solve the problem, the better off everybody involved will be.
I think it's a journey that we are still on. I think our services are becoming a lot more known in the community. When a client does present in that crisis situation, they're oftentimes surprised at the level of help that we give them.
We do have a housing first philosophy in Chatham-Kent, where we're trying to help everybody have a roof over their head that is long-term, that's stable, and that will help them along their path to better health.
It's so touching when the volunteers come back and they're excited and they're happy, but in a way they're sad too, because they've seen people in their absolute worst situation of having nowhere to sleep tonight. But at the end, they're hopeful. They're hopeful that we're going to be able to go out and wrap supports around people and help them find a place that they can call home. This week is the beginning of the end of homelessness in Chatham-Kent.
Some of those statistics have changed slightly, as you might have noted, because this video was created using some preliminary data that we had before we did some intensive data analysis. So what else did we find out? Well, 70 individuals in total were identified as experiencing homelessness in Chatham-Kent during our registry week. The average age of a homeless respondent was 38, and we found that men were more often to be homeless than females. Within our homeless population, the highest percentage has spent 6 months or more homeless, while 26% had been homeless 3 or more times in the past year, and the remaining respondents mostly experienced homelessness just one time. The top 3 reasons for homelessness include family breakdown, unsafe housing conditions, and conflict with non-family. 87% had shelter of some kind. They were hidden homeless or sheltered, while just 7% reported having no shelter at all. So what these statistics indicate to us is that our programs are working, and most people have a roof over their heads, but it's very precarious, and it could be day to day or month to month. Most startling of all these statistics is that 92% of homeless respondents combined will not be able to resolve their homeless situation without moderate to high levels of intervention. 48% need moderate, rapid rehousing support, and 44% need the highest level of support we can provide, which is ongoing, permanent supportive housing. In 2020 is going to come before we know it, and the lessons learned from 2018 will be a key factor in our future success. We currently have supportive youth programming and services, and as you've seen in your statistics, 20% of respondents were youth. But what's even more startling is that over 20% of homeless respondents identified as Indigenous during our registry week. And although efforts were made to be inclusive, it became readily apparent that more work needs to be done. We must establish and maintain better communication and collaborative partnerships, not only for Indigenous guided and led enumeration activities, but also for appropriate housing options, programs and services that reflect the high proportion of need in the Indigenous people. Additionally, if homelessness is a community issue, it's going to take a community coming together to end it. Enumeration itself should be a community effort, so we must use 2020 to educate and build community-wide commitment and momentum in ending homelessness locally. There are 7 recommendations listed here and in the report for community recommendations, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on a few. As I previously mentioned, 92% of homeless respondents combined will not be able to resolve their homelessness situation without moderate to high levels of intervention. Increases in rapid rehousing and supportive housing services cannot be achieved or maintained without the continuation and expansion of municipal, provincial, and federal funding initiatives. We ask Council to support the continuation and expansion of rapid rehousing and supportive housing programs, and to also lobby and advocate provincial and federal funding. Housing is the only way to end homelessness, and despite public pressure, and as a community, we need to continue to support Housing First initiatives, rather than emergency shelter options, which are reactionary and keep people homeless. We must, as a community, stand firmly behind validated and evidence-informed decision-making and planning. We must increase education and public awareness of why homelessness happens and continue implementation of best practices and cost-effective ways to end homelessness. Although we've made great strides in the last few years, there's clearly more work to be done. The findings in this report will be used to inform the next 5 years of our housing and homelessness plan. We must continue to build on our successes and ensure that supportive housing and affordable housing and available, accessible housing remains a community priority, so Chatham-Kent is a great place to live for everyone. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Chantel, I have a couple of things. It's a good report. You guys did a really good job. I remember that week, the work that went into it. One of the things that has become more visible in our community is the visible homelessness. And we get a lot of calls to the police, to the mayor, to councillors, employment social services. Can you just touch on that and why it seems that nothing is ever done about that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Crew. It may seem that not a lot is being done, but we are providing action in every situation that we hear of. We are getting more complaints as a community from businesses in Chatham and surrounding areas of people loitering, people that they feel are visibly homeless, and that services are not being provided. And that's simply not true. Every single report that we get of somebody, we send out a rapid rehousing case manager. We provide intervention. We provide rapid rehousing and supportive housing options if they're available. Unfortunately, not everybody wants to partake in in programming or service options that are available to them. As a community, we need to come together and continue to focus on increasing our mental health, our health, and our addiction services to be able to prompt people to access services and partake in services when they're available to them.
Okay, and you've touched on it, but could you just give a little bit more information about the Housing First strategy?
Sure. So Housing First is a really simple concept. Simply put, we want to end homelessness in Chatham-Kent by providing people with housing. We unfortunately don't have the budget or the capacity to build shelters or to fund shelters. Shelters keep people homelessness. They give some people somewhere to stay. They don't actually solve homelessness. The only thing that actually can is a roof over somebody's head that is long-term. So we go out and we work with people to give them first transitional housing options and then long-term supportive options.
Okay, thank you. You already outlined in those recommendations, one of my questions was, what can this council do? Mayor Ken, if those recommendations are up there, what happens after this? Should we adopt those recommendations, or should they come back for us to, in a report, to consider?
I think this evening this is an opportunity for council to receive the information. If there's specific recommendations, especially if there's financial considerations, we'd want to bring those back to council in individual reports with recommendations for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. So that will end my questions, and I hope that when this is received, that this is not the end of council looking at homelessness in our community. Thank you.
Councillor Foss, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Councillor Crew touched on one of my concerns. We did have a homeless person in Dresden a week or so ago, and the community, I felt, were really supportive. They tried to help him and, provide for him and give him TIM cards, and I think some even brought meals to him and that type of thing. And the police, I know, were involved in everything else in that. But he didn't want help. And I guess I'm not sure how to deal with that. I'm sure that's a problem. I look at the statistics, 7%, which is relatively low, but I guess if there's one that's homeless, that's too many type thing. But I guess, is there anything else we can do rather than just watching it, or I guess you can't make him do what he doesn't want to do type thing, but do you have any suggestions, I guess?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we did get calls about the person you're referring to in Dresden, and I spoke with the newspaper there as well. And I'll give you the same response that I spoke with the newspaper about, is if you do see somebody who you believe is visibly homeless, encourage them, if it's after hours, to contact our homeless response line. Immediately, by contacting our homeless response line, people are placed in safe emergency housing, and the very next business day, a rapid rehousing case manager goes out to provide transitional, then permanent solutions. It's great that the community wants to come together and provide meals or material things to people, but what we really need to do to solve the crisis is provide housing. Not everybody wants to access services, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. We repeatedly go out. We work with Canadian Mental Health closely. We work with the community mobilization team and the police, and we go out, usually weekly, sometimes daily, and keep providing encouragement and supports and mental health services to people to try to get them to make decisions that are often in their best interest.
Another comment, I guess. I think over the years, the last few years, Chatham-Kent has been supportive in increasing the housing programs as well. So I think in your question again, I think we are doing a lot of the things. We probably have to just continue to do those. So that's just a comment. So.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I think some of my questions have already been answered somewhat, but I did want to ask you, Chantal, and thank you for the report. I saw in your report that that homelessness is putting a strain on emergency services. So what feedback have you gotten from emergency services to deal with this issue, and how are these concerns and feedback being implemented?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We work with emergency services daily to provide supports and encourage supports and to place people in emergency, transitional, and then permanent housing. What we're hearing from our emergency service counterparts in police, EMS, fire, the Women's Center, victim services, is that we need to work together to end homelessness. We are really active at the first strategy table, and we take really urgent situations there for urgent action. But housing availability and affordability in Chatham is reaching a critical point. It's becoming a crisis. The average one bedroom right now is being listed for over $800 a month. And when you have a community where we have a large percentage of low-income people, that is really not realistic or affordable for people who are in receipt of low income. As a community, we need increased supports and services and funding for addiction, mental health, and our rapid rehousing and supportive housing service programs. Unfortunately, fortunately, we do have a couple of supportive housing programs, but they are limited and they are reaching a point of wait list. So we do need increased services and increased funding.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. You touched on it ever so slightly within the report here on Registry Week, so you might have to go back and just pull some information out of your mind here. Can you talk briefly in regards to homelessness, and I'm thinking more of our rural areas, the Blenheims, the Ridge Towns, but even the Pancores and the Deal Towns as well, how that compares to the homelessness situation in the city of Chatham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rural homelessness is different than in the community, the center of the city of Chatham. It's more usually more hidden in rural areas, and people couch surf a lot more often. They usually couch surf and use their family and friend support systems until they no longer have the ability to do so. Once that happens and they have nowhere else to go, they migrate into usually Chatham. Through our homeless response line after hours, anybody who calls, even if they're out in the rural areas, are provided transportation to a local motel, safe, affordable housing for the night, and then they're connected with the next day for transitional and permanent housing. It is different. It is more hidden. We don't often see people out in the community begging for food. However, we are starting to see it now. We've had reports in Tilbury, in Dresden. We've had a number of reports in Wallaceburg, which is a bit larger community, but we've seen it over the past year increasing here in Chatham. And all communities along the 401 are seeing, because of housing prices all across southwestern Ontario and the housing crisis that we're experiencing, people are becoming more mobile, and they're going from community to community trying to access services and supports.
All right, you kind of touched on it, and I'll push back ever so slightly and gently, because I think, or at least from my experience, if you become homeless, say in Blenheim, there are occasions you don't want to come into Chatham. Blenheim is your home. So, and you touched on some of the things we do. How do we address that? How do we bring more services to the rural communities?
That's a great question. We do provide services where the person is. So if somebody calls us, we will go to them. So we will go out to the rural areas. We have case managers in all of our communities in Chatham-Kent. We will also help the person find housing in the community of their choice. We don't want people to have to leave their community. If housing is available there, we can implement short-term housing allowances to make that housing affordable, especially while they may be on a rent-to-geared income wait list. We can also look at municipally funded portable housing benefits as well to keep people in their communities where their support system is.
All right, thank you very much. I guess the only comment I would add is that in the future when we talk about affordable housing and affordable housing construction, it's important to get some of those builds outside of the city of Chatham and into the more rural communities. So thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Yes, just a quick one. Because I did get a call regarding a homeless person in Wallaceburg over the Christmas holidays. Do you offhand, and I didn't see it in the report, the actual number for the homeless response line?
I used to know it. I don't know it. I have the cards in my purse, and I can hand them out to each of you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. One of the trends that we noted in the initial report, and is consistent in this report, is that youth are overrepresented. Individuals who've been in foster care group homes are overrepresented. And then one of our recommendations is to increase coordination with public institutions. So, I just wonder how we meet the challenge of engaging with youth who are typically not experienced in accessing municipal services or public services in general, and letting them know that before they face these factors that are challenges to becoming not homeless, or if they're in that group that's one event away from becoming homeless, how do we figure out who they are, identify them, and make sure those services meet the person that's in need, typically in that younger age demographic?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Continued community education, I think, is really important. We do have a youth program in conjunction with Access Open Minds and CMHA that is quite successful. We have 45 youth placed right now. We have done a lot of programming and inroads with Children's Integrated Services, and we have streamlined referral mechanisms as well. We're trying to get out to the schools more. In fact, I'm going to talk to a grade 9 class on Thursday a little bit about what homelessness looks like in our community and the supports it provides. So again, it's that continued community education, and we as a community and everybody in our community needs to talk more about this issue and the resources and supports that are in place to help people before they get to being homeless. I do have the numbers. Somebody looked it up on their phone and it slipped. And the number is 519-354-6628. And I do have some cards in my handbag, and I'll give them out to you after my presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Latimer.
Thank you. Thank you, through the mayor. Chantal, I just wondered, I wanted to ask the same question that Trevor did, or Councillor Thompson did, and as well Carmen McGregor and Councillor McGregor. And Councillor McGregor's too. Anyway, get over that. In my experience in the community, you're talking timelines. We call, someone responds, they're out there the next day, they're housed right away. That has not been my experience. So there are times when you are not meeting those timelines, correct? Or am I under a false impression? Have things improved over the last 6 to 8 months?
As we continually meet our targets of income support applications within a 4-day turnaround at the outset. An average is 2 days. And we meet our targets of response within 2 business days as well.
Okay. It is 2 days.
If you have heard differently, I would love to hear those reports and those stories so we can improve service.
Well, I think mine goes along the line of Councillor Thompson. Out in the rural communities, they don't even know this exists, and where would we look for that number, or even if it, as I say, they don't think the service exists for them out there. It's just for people in Chatham. So that would be my concern, because I had an incident occur over this past summer where I had actually a couple of homeless people, and one ended up staying in the homeless situation but did die. It was a palliative case and died in that situation. Partially because he chose to, but partially because we couldn't, the services couldn't get aligned due to people not being in their usual positions, summertime. And I was quite
Thanks
concerned.
for that feedback. It certainly lets us know that we do need to do more education and get word out there about what services we do have in the community.
Well, there's always specific. That's a specific case too. I don't think it's kind of a fluke. But I just wondered if you felt you were meeting your targets and that you were able to.
We do track our response time, so we do have those statistics available.
All right, thanks.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Chantal, through the mayor. Your report indicates that the Housing Services Act requires that service managers conduct these enumerations on an annual basis, and we've just been through a BMA report with some comparator communities. Do you have an opportunity to share statistics with your counterparts in some other communities to get an idea of what they're doing to address the issue of homelessness?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, that question came up when we gave our preliminary report here about 7 months ago, and so I am prepared to answer that question tonight. Chatham-Kent, we have a population of 101,000 people, and we have approximately 70 households that were homeless during our registry week. It is important to note, though, that the community comparisons, it's not comparing apples to apples. So service managers had the ability to choose between enumeration methodologies, such as a PIT count, a point-in-time count, a registry week, or a period prevalence count, or any mixture or combination of those that would best fit their community. And every community's stressors are different. And lastly, communities have different definitions of what homelessness means or is in their community. So keep in mind, it's not apples to apples. But Windsor-Essex, with a population of 2017 families, had 197 households. Sarnia-Lambton, with a population of 123,000, had 123 households. Well, Wellington Guelph, with a population of 131,000, had 322 households, and that's likely because they're in that in the area with Kitchener-Waterloo. Grey Bruce, with 93,000 households, counted 17 households during their enumeration. Peterborough, with 81,000 population, had 259 households. Dufferin, with a population of 61,000, had 44 households. And Stratford, with a population of 31,000, had 28 households.
Thank you very much. It sounds like we're doing okay, although Councillor Foz has indicated that one is too many. So thank you very much.
Can I get a motion to receive the report? Councillor Bondi, followed by, or seconded by Councillor Crew. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 15B.
Item 15B, Ontario Works Assistant Administrator Appointment.
Councillor Crew.
I would move the recommendation that 1, Polly Smith, Director of Employment and Social Services Division, be appointed the Ontario Works Administrator role pursuant to the requirements of the Ontario Works Act 1997, and that 2, the appointment of Polly Smith as the Administrator of Ontario Works in Chatham-Kent be submitted to the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services for approval on Council's behalf by the General Manager, Community Human Services, and that bylaw 267-2003 be repealed.
Seconded by Councillor Kirkwood-White. Any questions? Seeing none, put to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
16B.
Item 16B, motion by Councillor B. McGregor regarding lessons learned report.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. In an effort to govern with full transparency and address red tape concerns that inhibit the business community in Chatham-Kent, I move that administration provide the lessons learned report related to the 10-7 Cafe to Council for immediate review and discussion, and I would add clarity on the end of that in closed session.
Any seconder? Councillor Finn. The floor is yours, Councillor B. McGregor.
So fairly straightforward motion. This report was to come to the previous council in November in closed session, was unable to be put forward at that time. It essentially deals with some learning opportunities related to relationships with businesses in the community. I think based on what we've heard through the election process and the need to support local and small businesses and improve in that area, that this makes sense for council to see sooner rather than later. So I'm looking forward to support to see this report shortly. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Bondi?
Thanks, Mayor Kim. I'm just curious, why didn't we get it in the first place? Like, it was on the closed agenda twice, I think, right? Yeah, I thought it was twice, but was it just incomplete, or the whole thing's kind of a mystery. Obviously, nobody's seen the report, so I'm just curious as to
Mr. Norton,
why was there delay? Like,
Mr. Mayor, so I wrote the report in the summer. It was ready to go many months ago. We have now an integrity commissioner investigation related to the same matter. I had advised council in closed session to wait until the completion of the integrity commissioner's work and his final report before bringing this forward to you.
In closed?
In closed, yes.
That takes all the suspense out of it, John, but okay, thanks.
Seeing no other questions, put the, oh, do we, Amy Finn second. Put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
16C.
Item 16C, motion by Councillor Solomon regarding location of cannabis retail stores.
Thank you, Your Worship. The motion is that the province be requested to provide Ontario municipalities with regulatory powers over the location of marijuana stores in their municipalities, and that the province be requested to restrict retail marijuana sales within 500 meters of schools, recreation centers, community centers, parks, and libraries.
Any seconder for that? Councillor Bondi. Councillor Solomon?
I can't imagine there's any discussion on it, but other communities have brought this same motion. Other progressive communities who also said that they wanted marijuana stores in their community.
Any questions? Councillor Hall?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I did have a concern with the second part of the of Councillor Solomon's motion that that requests restricting that 500-meter buffer between schools and recreational centers and community centers, parks, and libraries. I heard from the community, from some people in Wallaceburg that had some concerns about that being too restrictive or being too far. Of it being too restrictive, I guess. And, you know, I took out a map and looked at for example, our library in Wallaceburg. It's right downtown. So if you draw out a line that's 500 meters from there, it basically restricts the whole downtown core of Wallaceburg from being able to have one of these retail marijuana stores. Now, whether that's the right spot and the right place for one of these stores to be, I don't know. That more engagement, I guess, would need to happen from that. But and if you look in other parts of the town, there's other areas that are going to be restricted by this that would kind of take some of the outlying communities in Chatham-Kent out of this equation to have some of these opportunities. So I can support the first part of the motion, obviously, to request to have some of that some of that power from a municipal perspective, but I can't support the second part of the motion as it stands right now.
Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just want to echo some of the comments that Councillor Hall has just made. In my own conversations with some of the BIAs and other community groups in my region, there was a concern brought up, especially from business people who are interested in retail cannabis sales in Chatham-Kent around that 500-meter mark. I would be supportive of the first clause. I personally, as a councillor, would want more information before we decide to restrict essentially what would be like a planning item, and look at what some comparators are and how the province provides recommendations around that before supporting the second clause. So Councillor Solomon, I'm not sure if he's willing to divide the motion into two clauses.
We can divide them. Yeah. Councillor B. McGregor.
My request was going to be to divide.
Any other questions? Councillor?
No, I guess I better speak to it. And first is a question through to administration. It's my understanding that there would be only one marijuana outlet in granted to Chatham-Kent. Does that change? Because if it is, they're not going to be in Highgate or Wheatley or Tilbury, or it's going to be decided by the province to be in the biggest populated area. Has that changed?
To the best, unless there's some updated information, Your Worship, I believe that there is not a restriction currently on the number of stores that you can have in a community. Certainly on the first 25, there's definitely a restriction, and that may change going down the road. But the current restriction is population centers of at least 50,000.
Yeah, so there's only one place that can be located at the current with the current restrictions. So the other concerns to me seem somewhat moot, because you have to have a population of 50,000. Is that not what I just heard?
Mr. Mayor, maybe if I can jump in. So there wasn't originally a plan to just have one store per municipality like Chatham-Kent.
Yes.
They've removed that restriction now. Okay. They're now opening it up to allow, essentially, the legislation now allows for as many stores as the market will support. So we could end up with 5 stores on King Street. We could end up stores in many small communities. However, subsequent to that, the province has also made clear they're only issuing initially 25 licenses for all of Ontario. So my understanding is that that restriction is related to the lack of product for them, product available in Ontario. But then when more product becomes available, perhaps they will start issuing more licenses. So to be clear, they've removed any ability for the municipality to have any influence on where these stores will go. And so I think your motion is attempting to address, that, to bring back some planning controls to the municipality to control where these stores could eventually go.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Cannabis. I support the entire motion, A and B, in that I understand what many councillors are saying. It's restrictive, to not have necessarily a prime location. I think maybe that's the point, is to keep this out of the downtown core. And frankly, I think a cannabis retail store you could put pretty well anywhere. People, if they want to buy some grass, they're going to go, right? Like, take a look at the liquor store in, Cannabis, I'm sorry. The liquor store in Pancor on holidays seems to be pretty busy. Not that I would know, I'm just out picking children up from school. But I don't think, the restriction, I think, makes sense. And again, it's not location when you're selling cannabis. It's what you're selling. So I don't think it'll affect the retailer. So I'll support the entire motion. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. I want to echo again the sentiments of Councillor Hall and Councillor Harrigan. And Councillor Bondi brought up a good point, because the LCBO in Pancor, you couldn't put it there. In fact, I did a fair bit of work. You couldn't put them anywhere in built-up Chatham-Kent. You couldn't put them in Chatham. You couldn't put them in Blenheim. Couldn't put them in anywhere. Actually, there isn't a town in Chatham-Kent that would meet the criteria of the second half of the motion. So I suppose you could probably put it out on Bear Line and Country View if you wanted to, but I don't know how many people are going to travel around out there. I'm also not familiar with any sort of, I know of one sort of business where we would put those sort of restrictions in place. And I don't think it's our place to. I think either we're in or we're out, so I can support the first half, but again, I can't support the second half.
Councillor Solomon.
It's so important to get this done that I'll withdraw the second half. And we can deal with that ourselves if we have the regulatory powers. But there should be restrictions around schools, community centers, and libraries. So if it's not 500, we'll do it ourselves when you all support me and pass this.
So second, or well, I guess you're good with that? Pulling the second part of it? Okay. Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. I don't need to speak now. That part's been removed.
Any other questions? If not, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Okay, there's no closed session reports, so 18A, Approval of January 14th, 2019 council information package. Got a motion to approve. Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Pinsino. All in favor? Opposed? Non-agenda business items. Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Your Worship. I received an email this afternoon from Don Hector, who is the coordinator of the Chatham-Kent and Lambton Children's Water Festival, and he wanted to remind everybody that this is their 10th annual water festival, and it will be held on October 1st to 3rd of this year. It's a 3-day event, and they have been welcoming over 600 children each day for the 3-day event.
Thank you. Reading the bylaws first and second. Can I get a motion? Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Latimer. All in favor? Opposed? Council go to committee. Resumption of council. Third and final reading. Motion. Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Pinsino. All in favor? Opposed? Resolution of council.
Thank you. And through the mayor, I would move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, January 21st, 2019, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
Thank you. Have a great night.